Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a wonderful guest. I'm so excited to bring to you Alyssa Byczek. She's actually a recruiter, a CRA recruiter with some of the top CROs in the industry. So we get to take a special inside peek at exactly what the gatekeeper, I like to call you guys, the gatekeeper has to say about CRAs getting in the industry, entry-level roles. And ironically, she was actually one of the recruiters that helped me get my first CRA role with one of the top CROs. So I'm so excited to have you on, Alyssa, as my guest today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes. So let's jump right into it. How about we start with, I'm pretty sure people, of course, I know a little bit about your background and how you got into the industry, what you do, but let's start with you sharing, how long you've been a recruiter, specifically how you got into the clinical research space, and then even more specific, recruiting for CRAs, and share that piece of your background with us.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually fell into recruiting, and then even more so, I fell into clinical research recruiting. I was looking for a new opportunity, and I drove by one day and saw this big building, applied there. I honestly had no idea what a CRA was before I started recruiting for you all. So it took a lot of learning on my end. I'd been a participant in clinical research trials before, so I knew it from the patient side, but I had never actually known what goes on behind the scenes. So that was a lot of learning there. When I was with my previous company, I was just a CRA recruiter. Different companies have their recruiters structured very differently. I've recently started with a new role, and I actually recruit for all types of roles in my current position. So it's important, if you are looking for an opportunity, figure out the recruiters that you're working with. Do you want to find someone who's just recruiting for CRAs? Are there people who may recruit for multiple roles, of which they handle a CRA role? So that's something to always think about as well.
Nice. So one of the things, I guess, the questions that I get a lot from aspiring CRAs, and even people that haven't quite made it to that level yet where they should be searching for a CRA role. But where do recruiters hang out? Where are you guys searching for candidates primarily?
LinkedIn, 1000% LinkedIn. And I've seen your videos before. I know you talk about how important it is to really brand yourself on LinkedIn. And just to echo that, it is 1000% important to make sure you have a presence on LinkedIn. Make sure you have a picture, make sure it's of just yourself, make sure you have your title up to date, your company up to date, and your experience, because that is really where we go to look for our candidates.
Awesome. And I'm so glad you say that, because people think I'm crazy. When I, they ask them like LinkedIn, they're like, what? Like they think it's some special secret. And no, like literally just create a LinkedIn profile. Yeah. And another dying question that I have from some of my clients and some of the people that follow me, are you on Indeed anymore? Is that still a thing?
So we may be. However, when we're looking for candidates, so there are a few ways I might find a candidate. Sometimes they'll apply, and especially for our entry-level CRA roles, we do get a lot of applicants. We'll look through our applicant system and find candidates there. If not, referrals are one of the best ways to get into the role. So use your network, find people who currently work at those companies and ask them to refer you into that position. And then lastly, we'll go and we'll find them through job boards, or most likely it is LinkedIn. We may look on Indeed, Glassdoor, some other sites, but it is through primarily LinkedIn or, network groups on LinkedIn.
Okay. And I heard you mention the applicant system. So that's another thing that I've incorporated a whole lesson on in my program, the applicant tracking system and speaking ATS and how to beat it and how to stay on top of it. And then also setting up your job profile within each company's applicant tracking system. So, would you say that that is kind of like an integral component to your job search? Because a lot of people feel like unless you apply directly for a specific job within the system, there's no point in kind of having your, a profile set up where they can search for you. Is that an integral component?
I definitely think it is. When I was looking for my most recent opportunity, I would go on for companies that I really wanted to work for, and you can actually set job alerts. So any company, you can go to their careers page, and I tell people this all the time, scroll down, you can receive
Mm-hmm.
job notifications for the roles that you're interested in. So that way you get in as soon as that role is posted. It's very important because a lot of the times we may only have a few positions open. So you don't want to be applying weeks later when we've already had a chance to bring candidates through that interview process. Again, it goes back to making sure your profile is accurate and up to date, and making sure that all of your information there, your contact information, your name, are going to be accurate so that way we can reach out to you and find you that way.
Absolutely. And are all jobs always posted publicly and available? Or sometimes, at least to my knowledge, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, some jobs aren't necessarily made publicly available, but you guys have those JDs and you're internally searching, or even externally, but you're not advertising it, so to speak, while you're searching for candidates to fulfill those roles. Is that correct?
So legally, jobs do have to be posted externally if there's actually a position open.
Okay.
Sometimes we do what we call pipelining. So if we know that we may have a position opening soon, but it's not open just yet, we might start pipelining candidates. So candidates who we think would be a great match. What I will say is that, especially for experienced CRA roles, with the way the industry is now, 99% of the time, companies are always going to be hiring that role. So a lot of the times it's for new work. Sometimes it is for attrition, but there is always going to be a role open there. With the entry-level positions, some companies will do cohorts or groups where they'll bring candidates on and train them. Now, those roles are not going to be always posted, and it is very important for candidates who are looking for that entry-level role to get in and apply as quickly as possible, but also be aware of what jobs you're applying for, because it's not helpful when I see that you've applied for 20 senior CRA roles when you don't have that senior CRA experience, and sometimes it'll make it harder for us to find you in the system because we'll just see that you've been rejected so many times, and instead we want to see that you are qualified for the role that you're applying for.
And that makes perfect sense, which I frequently talk about, people doing themselves a disservice by applying to jobs that you absolutely are not qualified for. There's a difference between like that stretch kind of qualification versus like this is completely, totally outside of your scope. So talk to us a little bit more about that. And can candidates potentially kind of blacklist themselves, so to speak, like as you were saying that, you see that they've applied so many, rejected so many times that you just have them on a list where you're not even contacting those particular candidates at all?
Yes, I wouldn't say that they're blacklisted. It does definitely make a lot more work for the recruiters when we have to go through and we see you've applied to 50 different roles just within our company. And it makes us question kind of, what are you looking for in a job? Because I see you've applied from everywhere from like a VP position down to, a records associate to the CRA role. It makes me wonder, are you going to be open to that travel with the CRA position? So I would say make sure that you're applying for roles that are at your level. If you do have a few months of on-site monitoring experience, you might be able to apply for that senior role. However, really read the job descriptions, read the job titles, see if it requires you to be located in a certain area. You don't want to go ahead and apply to positions in every region of the United States if you're only living in one area and not open to relocation. So those are things to consider, whether it's the job title, the experience, and what requirements are absolutely required. So a lot of the times, if there's an educational requirement, it is unfortunately what we call hard requirement, where you do need that level of education. I know you've talked about that in the past. Sometimes where it says experience and we're looking, 2 to 3 years of experience, if you only have 1 year, we may still consider you.
Right. And segueing into that education piece, I'm sure you probably get the same. There's a lot of people that they say, oh, I've been a study coordinator for 20 years, or, I've been a CTA for 10 years, or whatever the case may be. They feel like they have all this experience, right? But they don't have a bachelor's level degree. Is that a deal breaker when it comes to being a CRA?
Unfortunately, it is about 90% of the time. It's not always a company requirement. It is usually a sponsor requirement. And in this role, you may have to work with multiple sponsors. So in those cases, you do need to have that bachelor's degree. Occasionally, if you have an associate's degree, but you have a great years of experience, then we will consider you. Or if you have things like your LPN or different certifications, those will help, but it still comes down to meeting those minimum educational requirements.
Right. Which I tell people all the time. So you heard it straight from the recruiter. I didn't make this up. You need a bachelor's degree. But one great thing, Alyssa, to my knowledge, although, the industry prefers life sciences and, degrees within that area, it's not necessarily a deal breaker if you have a degree outside of that area. Is that correct?
That is correct. So, especially if you have that research experience, we really don't care what your bachelor's degree is in. A lot of the times, yes, the teams do prefer that you have some sort of science degree. And if it comes down to, we have one role open in 20 candidates, it may be the candidate with the science background and science degree that comes in first. Mm-hmm. However, as long as you have that research experience and that bachelor's degree, that's what's going to qualify you for that position.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then what about advanced level degrees? How do they fit into the equation? Is this becoming more of a requirement? Is it a deal breaker? Is it something that you recommend to candidates?
So honestly, it depends on the person. I personally have not seen advanced degrees as a requirement. They're always a plus. Our hiring managers love if you have that master's or PhD. However, most companies don't pay more for that advanced degree. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about it personally. Are you able to front those costs? Why do you want to pursue that advanced degree? I come from a former teacher background, so I will never discourage someone for continuing to pursue higher education. Go out and do it. However, if it comes down to, you not having the funds for it, or if it's not something that you desire, then I would say you don't need it at this point.
Absolutely. And it's hard for me to try to convince people of that, considering that I do have a graduate level degree, but I try to tell people all the time, trust me, you don't need it. But of course, then they say, well, why do you have one? But it's just lack of knowledge, really. If I had known more about, and not to say that my degree has not helped me with my career, because I do have a pharmacology background, and I started out with a PhD program in pharmacology. And once I figured out I wanted to be a CRA, that's when I said, there's no point in me finishing. So my committee let me write up my, all the research I was doing and get my master's in a thesis versus the PhD and dissertation. But if I had known before I applied to graduate school, I honestly would not have gone. So it's good to hear you say that. So I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to discourage anyone that wants to go and further their education. But at the same time, it is, I wanted to make it clear, if it's not a requirement or not, I wanted you to at least speak on that and make that clear. So that's, no, what were we about to say?
I was going to say, that's a great point, that if someone has, an arts degree in their bachelor's, that they may then want to pursue their master's in science, and that will only further their career. Also, the more you move up throughout the CRA role, other roles may then require a master's degree. So this is really just for getting into that CRA role. A master's is not required, but as you continue to pursue and grow in your career, there may be other positions that do require that master's or PhD level.
Absolutely. So what would you say would be the types of more entry-level industry roles that you would like to see for the candidates that have no monitoring experience, but you're seeking to fill an entry-level CRA role?
Yes. So there are three main career paths. I would say the clinical research coordinator. It does not matter whether you're at a site, whether you're with a sponsor, you need that coordinating experience. We really look for candidates who have a strong regulatory background, who have patient interaction. It might help if you have experience with dispensing the investigational product or IP. So that role is going to make you a great CRA because you know what to look for when you're in the CRA position. Alternatively, you can look at the CTA, Clinical Trials Assistant or Associate role, or the in-house CRA role. Those roles will also help you get into the CRA role itself. It is very important to kind of discern the differences. I know some people come to me and they say, hey, I'm a project coordinator. Does that still count as a coordinator? And it does give you some research experience, but it is not going to be the same type of experience. Those skills are not going to be as transferable as somebody who has been a clinical research coordinator.
And it's funny you mentioned those three roles because I actually did a video on that, talking about how those are literally the top three roles that will get you into that CRA path. And like you said, all roles aren't created equal, right? So just you have to be careful sometimes with the title because the title may kind of be misleading and making you think that you're taking on those responsibilities, but depending on the organization, it may not be the full gamut of like responsibilities and tasks that you would typically see in those traditional roles. So I'm glad you mentioned that as well. It feels great to know that I'm right on track with what I've been saying. I have not been making these things up, people. So what would you say, another question I get, what would you say is the amount of time that you would recommend for one to spend within these roles?
I would say, honestly, probably minimum 2 years. So that is really the minimum requirement we look for. We also don't want to see somebody who is hopping from one role to another. So I know some candidates I've talked to, they have some great background, and maybe in their first coordinating role, they weren't able to do any regulatory because there was a specific department that worked on regulatory. So they decided to change companies, and then they only stayed there for a few months because they got that experience and then they tried to move on. Well, unfortunately, to the teams, our hiring managers, they don't love to see that. As a recruiter, as a person, I totally understand. You want to gain that experience so you can keep going. However, there are other ways to gain that experience by staying in your current role, whether it's partnering with your regulatory team or shadowing them, maybe taking a certification class that will give you that regulatory experience. So again, I would say try to remain in your role for a very minimum 1 year, if not 2 or more years. We love to see people who have been coordinators for 5, 6, 7 years. That is great. It really depends on the person. It depends on the individual and what your experience you're able to gain in your role, but 2 years.
Okay. So for the people that are hopping into these roles and they have 2 or 3 months and then they expect to be a CRA the next week, I'm not going to say it's impossible because I am a believer in the impossible, but don't make that your plan.
Exactly. And I mean, the industry is getting more and more competitive, so the requirements are getting a little bit lower. Mm-hmm. However, you do need to gain the fundamentals before you're able to move into the CRA role because we want great monitors working on these studies.
Absolutely. So the entry level roles that you spoke about earlier, you mentioned they're not, as always frequently available as the more experienced roles that are pretty much, kind of just constantly open. For the entry level positions, what would you say, or what advice would you give to people to help them stand out as a candidate?
I would say keeping your LinkedIn up to date. Tell us what therapeutic areas you're working on. Tell us what you're doing in your role. That really helps us to really figure out if you're going to be a match for the position when we're looking. Another great way to stand out is to become a referral. So network with people, talk to people that you know that are in the industry and see if they will refer you into the role. That way there's somebody who can vouch for your experience that will help you stand out right away. We're able to figure it out that way. Other things I would say are just connecting with people in the industry, connecting with other recruiters as well. And we're going to be able to see, you can look at our job profiles, our activity to see what kind of jobs are we posting about. And then the recruiter may be able to help you find the role or tell you when the next available role is going to be.
Nice. And I heard you say become a referral. So I've made this suggestion as well. And a lot of people come back and say, well, I've had, this person, that person refer me. Nobody has reached out to me. And I hear this quite common. So are referrals something that companies actually, take advantage of and consider, or is it kind of just like a formality?
No, it is 100% something that we consider. It is proven that refers are going to perform higher, they're going to onboard faster, they're going to stay longer with companies. So companies really do prioritize employee referrals. And a lot of the times, the person referring you will get some sort of benefit, whether it's a bonus or some sort of credit for referring you if you're hired. So that is how you really want to go into the role instead of just applying on your own.
That's good to hear. So another question I feel like I always get, and again, it's hard for me to tell people not to focus on certifications because I have them. But getting your CCRA through ACRP, which of course you need monitoring experience to get. So most of the times that in and of itself will disqualify people. But they do have an exception for people that have gone through like one of those training programs or gotten like a degree in it. And that have a certain amount of internship hours, they do make that exception. So that certification, and then, now they have that new CRP certification, the clinical research professional one as well. And then the CCRP through SOCRA. How important are these certifications when it comes to entry-level roles? Does it actually help? Is it, something that you consider with whether you say yes or no to them being hired?
That's a great question. So I won't say that it's going to hurt ever, because the more experience you have, the more knowledge you have, it's going to give you a leg up from everyone else. However, if you only have a certification and you don't have any research experience or a strong research background, then unfortunately it isn't going to help. Mm-hmm. I have people ask me all the time, hey, I want to be a CRA. Can I take this fast track program, or can I just get my certification? And unfortunately, we will consider you, but someone who actually has that coordinating experience, or maybe they're an in-house CRA without the certification, is going to be a more qualified candidate than you, just because they actually have the hands-on experience and knowledge. If you're in a position where you're not able to gain all of the knowledge that you're looking for, then that certification is really going to help. That's going to help when you get to the interview process to answer any of the questions that the managers are throwing at you, and it's really going to help expand your knowledge base, but it is not going to guarantee you a job just by having a certification.
Right. I'm so glad you said that. And I actually didn't get any of my certifications until after I became a CRA, because like you said, I didn't feel like they would help me get the job, but it definitely was helpful in terms of, progressing my career once I became a CRA. So glad you mentioned that. And I guess my next burning question that people seem to always ask a lot about when it comes to interviewing, they always seem to get tripped up on the behavioral and or the situational questions. So any tips, any feedback that you would like to give to the candidates on those specific types of questions?
Yes. So in interview, we're not going to just look at your behavioral questions. We're also going to look at your behavior as a person itself. So just to take a step back, one thing I always like to tell candidates is when you come to an interview, which you have mentioned in your other videos, be professional. Wear nice clothes, be in a quiet space, or at least as quiet as you can, have nice lighting. So I know I'm in a temporary living situation. I have done the best I can at this time with my lighting. You can see I've got a curtain behind me. We really want to see something that's going to look professional, or at least the best of your abilities. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that you need to take in consideration when you're interviewing. Now, when it comes to the questions that we're going to ask you, with behavioral questions, I tell candidates all the time, use the STAR method. So if you Google, it's STAR. So it stands for situation, task, action, and result. Interviewers can only ask you so many different types of questions. So a time when you had a challenge, think about ahead of time, what are all the challenges that you've had that you can use as an example? Tell me, what was the situation? I had this challenge. What did you do? What kind of actions did you take? And then what was the result? Don't ever say, I had a problem. Because I've had candidates do that before. I'm okay helping you get to that answer.
No way.
And our hiring managers, they're going to be like, okay, she had a problem. And that's just not going to show you in your best light. Think about times, how do you manage your time? How do you stay organized? When have you had to deal with a change? Think about all of these things. You can go to Google and just Google top interview questions. And as long as you have 2 or 3 examples in your mind at the forefront, you can take those examples and spin them to answer that interviewer's question.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the STAR method. This is another thing that I teach within my coaching program in my course. We have a whole entire lesson and examples on the STAR method and how to break down, like you said, the STA and R, and what that means and what you guys are specifically looking for. So, wow. We're on the same page. So even still, like I said, I have this in my course. I bring it to people's attention. I say, this is what XYZ. It's like you lay it out, 1 + 1 = 2, but it's still something that's missing, that people, I don't know if it's their nerves that's getting to them, if it's the confidence factor, maybe they're just like, this is my, they put too much pressure on themselves. I'm not sure what it is. But what would you say, or what kind of recommendation or advice would you give to people that are listening and they say, okay, I know all of that, I've been doing all that, but I get to the interview and I still don't get the offer?
I would say, don't be hard on yourself. All right. It could be a few different things. It could be that you think you're doing better than you are, honestly. The recruiter is there to help you. We're not trying to trick you or anything. We really want you to do your best, because that's what's going to help us along to figure out, are you going to be the best candidate for this role? And then when it comes down to it, a lot of the times there may only be a few openings for that position. It may be you are an amazing candidate who we would love to have, but there may be one candidate who has just a little bit more experience than you, or who may have that therapeutic area that the team is really looking for while you don't. It does not mean that we're not going to consider you in the future. I've had candidates who I've talked to, it didn't work out at that time just because, maybe the role was limited or they didn't have enough experience. And then I reached out to them a year later and we were able to get them in that position. Do not give up. I recently changed roles. The job market is harder than ever. It is going to take a lot of applying, a lot of interviewing, which, think of it as a learning experience. You can only learn from every interview you do. And then making sure you find the best role for you. I like to think that things happen for a reason. So maybe if it's not happening right now, you gain that experience and you'll get an even better opportunity in a few months.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I always encourage building a network. A lot of people think of networking as something that you do temporarily until you find a job, especially entry-level CRAs. They think, oh, I'll just do this so I can get my first role. But it's really an integral part of your career long-term. It's not just something that you do as a one-off or, a phase of your career, so to speak. You should constantly be networking, whether you're looking for a job or not, right? Because like you said, you never know what comes up 6 months, a year down the road. So maintaining those relationships, building and maintaining those relationships are key to the success of your career. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That's definitely something that I also teach in my program as well. And so another question that people typically kind of get tripped up on the interview is the basic one, which I guess now more so, since I'm no longer entry level, I'm more advanced in my career. I honestly haven't seen this question asked to me a lot lately, but the tell me about yourself question. How do you recommend approaching that? Because as I've been working with my clients and stuff like that, some of the responses are, they start telling me stuff about their personal lives that it's like, no. Don't start there.
There is no right way to answer this question. I practice with my friends all the time on how to answer this question, and you need to figure out what is the best way for you, what makes you feel most comfortable. So normally what I'll do is I will give you a little bit of back history on myself. I might tell you where I went to school, what I started out doing, and then how did I get into this role and why am I looking for the position that we're talking about. It should be a quick 2 to 3 minute answer. Please don't tell us your whole life story. We have seen it. We've heard it. We've heard your personal struggles. This is not the place or time for that. Just give a quick back history. You might have, if you're a newer grad, you could say you graduated with your degree in biology, then you became this role. You went into a clinical research coordinator position, and now you're ready to move on to your next step. Short and sweet. Keep it to the point. If you want to work your way backwards, you could say, oh, I'm currently a clinical research coordinator with this company. Prior to that, I was a research assistant, and then I had gotten my bachelor's degree in whatever it was at this school. Just nice and sweet. We don't need a lot of details. It's just to give us an overview of where you're at.
So how long would you say is too long?
I would say if you are sitting there and you're talking, you hear yourself rambling, it is too long. Practice, really practice. When I'm interviewing or when I have candidates interviewing, I will have them practice with me. Go ahead and tell me, all right, well, what if we make it a little bit shorter? All right, you're rambling a bit there. Or maybe that was just too short. Give me just a little bit more. Practice with your friends. Be like, hey, can I tell you this real quick? Does that sound okay? And if they're giving you the look where they're bored, it is too long. If, you finished and they're still looking at you like, that's it, then you need to just keep going and give them a little more detail.
So 30 seconds, would you say that?
Yeah, 30 seconds to a minute. Probably, 2, 3, 5 sentences, not a whole paragraph.
Okay. But anything beyond that, you're talking too much.
Yes. And you've lost my attention, which is not what you want.
Okay. That's good to know. Cause I do get the ramblers and I always advise, I say 60 to 90 seconds. Is kind of like the limit, but anything past that, definitely past 2 minutes, is like, that's it's supposed to be a conversation. The interview really, that's how I coach on it, is that it should really be a conversation more so as an interview. So a conversation, of course, is exchange of information between both parties. And if you're always the one that's talking, then, we have a problem.
Well, and the more experience you have, the longer that can be. But especially if you're just starting out and you've only been working in the industry, or even you've only been working, period, for about 3 years, a whole life story is unnecessary.
Right.
So.
Right. But I did want to hone in on the point that there's no need in telling us about where you went to elementary school and middle school, and, where you lived when you were a kid and you moved to, don't share those things. So that's good to know. And then I should have brought this up earlier, but I did hear you say when you mentioned LinkedIn that you needed to have a picture. I forgot to kind of probe you on that, but I wanted you to go a little bit more in depth on that, because that's something that I really pay a lot of attention to for my clients, and making sure it's not, I hate the picture in the car with the seatbelt, the selfie. You don't have to pay a lot to get professional photos, right? But at least just do a plain background in the house or outside with the trees, something, but just don't, or at least just take the seatbelt off. But I hate to see those. So how important is a picture truly? Do you overlook profiles that don't have a picture?
It depends. Sometimes we may think that you're not going to be active on LinkedIn if you don't have that picture there. So should we reach out to you, or are you going to respond? So somebody who has a picture tells us, all right, they're here on LinkedIn, they're an active person, they're going to be interacting with us if we try and reach out. I don't mind the seatbelt picture. I don't love it, but it is better than not having a picture at all. So if your favorite picture of yourself is sitting in the car with a seatbelt, go for it. The thing that I really don't like is when people do group photos. I don't know who you are in that photo. That really doesn't give me insight to who you are as a person. I would love to have a picture on there. You don't have to be all super dressed up. You can be in a t-shirt. That's fine. My picture on there was taken by one of my friends, and we just used portrait mode to blur the background. So it does not have to be professional. If it is professional, that is great. That is wonderful. I love the professional photos. But if that is not something feasible for you, or if you need something right now, just a quick selfie is going to be perfect.
Awesome. So that's good to hear. And I forgot to mention the group photos too. Yes. Those are definitely confusing. Like, which one are you? But the take home, of course, is to have something, right? That little blank default image of the shape of the head is is definitely a no-go. But you don't exclude people that don't have a profile picture if their profile is strong enough. If that is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So if you don't have a photo, that's okay. We'll still reach out to you, or if you message us, we'll still respond. But having a picture is preferable.
Okay. And how do you feel about people that attach or post their resume to their profile and make it available, as one of the featured items?
That definitely helps. So a lot of the times hiring managers may say, we need someone with this specific experience. Maybe it's in rare diseases. So at that time, you could be a stellar candidate, but if you don't have that experience, we may not be able to reach out. Having your resume will really help us tell, are you qualified for this role at this time? If not, we can save resumes for the future. We talked about pipelining before, so I might be able to pipeline you, and then as soon as the role opens, I can reach right out to you. I think that is wonderful. An important thing to note about LinkedIn is that you really want to make sure it is up to date. So make sure that your current experience is listed, that the dates are accurate, and that your titles are accurate. A lot of the times I see people who are so desperate to get into that CRA role, they may change their title to say that they're currently a CRA, and that does not help anyone out. I'll get you on the phone. I find out you're not a fit. We'll have to reconnect in the future. And at that point, you're wasting my time. You're wasting your time, which is not what we want to do. You also never want to change your title. Sometimes I see people who they may be a CTA, but they want to be a CRA, and they'll say, oh, well, I've gone out and co-monitored a few times, or I've shadowed. Unfortunately, companies do background checks, and we'll need to make sure that the information that you put on your resume and your LinkedIn is valid, and we will verify that. So you never want to falsify any information. It is more important to accurately represent yourself.
Yes, I've seen that as well. And one person I spoke with actually talked about how it's becoming an industry problem with people that are falsifying information, whether that be, like you said, just saying they were CRA for X amount of years or held other roles for X amount of years. So is this something that you guys kind of keep tabs on if you identify a person that maybe kind of presented some conflicting information? Do you keep a list of these people, or do you still kind of leave it open to, maybe be able to follow up with them again in the future?
That's a great question. So each company does things differently. Recruiters may just keep notes. We can add notes to your LinkedIn profiles internally or in our ATS. And if you falsify your experience, that is something that may keep you out of being considered in the future. So you always want to be as accurate as possible. Have your LinkedIn match your resume. That is very important. We want to see that those dates are valid. If you had a gap, don't worry about it. Just show that you had a gap. It happens, especially now with the pandemic. A lot of people lost their jobs. Don't ever be ashamed. If you took some time off to be a stay-at-home parent, that is okay. We don't mind. I would much rather see that you've done that than instead change the dates on your resume to kind of show that there wasn't a gap, because again, that could take you out of consideration in the future if the teams are finding out that you are misrepresenting yourself.
Right. And so what would you say, I guess before I even touch on that, I want to ask this question. I keep saying I'm going to ask, I forget, so I have to ask. Cover letters, is that still a thing now, or are they becoming obsolete?
It depends on the company. Some companies require them for certain roles. Other companies don't. If you have one, I'll glance at it. I'll read it over because you put some time into it. A lot of times people just do generic cover letters, which is okay. One thing I will say is make sure if you are submitting a cover letter that the information on there, if you're using a generic template, is correct. I've seen resumes submitted or cover letters submitted to have the wrong company name in there. So always take time. If you're going to do that extra step with the cover letter, that is your opportunity to say why you are such a great fit for that specific position at that specific company. Pull up the job description and look at the requirements and say, all right, I would be a great fit for this entry-level CRA role because I have this regulatory experience that you're looking for. I have this many years of experience in the industry. That is a place where you can really add all those details that are on your resume. And again, going back to it, we can see how you've saved your cover letters and your resumes. So please don't say that this is your CV for this company if it's not the correct company that you're submitting it to, or don't say, something crazy in there, because we can see that. It's best to just say your name and then CV. You could put the year or the date if you have multiples. That's okay as well.
Nice. Very good advice. So another question, going back to the LinkedIn profile, and I know you said that that's kind of like your primary job search tool. What types of keywords are you searching or putting in LinkedIn and in other job search systems too? But what types of keywords are you using to typically search for the entry-level CRA candidates?
Yeah, so that's a great point. Even looking in our ATS system, recruiters can search through an ATS system. So you can have these keywords on your LinkedIn or your resume. At every company I've worked at, there are real people looking at your resumes. I know some companies use the AI or automated intelligence screening. We personally look at every single resume submitted. Keywords that are going to be great to use are going to be whatever is found in that job description that you're applying for. So if it says that you need a certain therapeutic area, or if you need certain experience, whether it's with dispensing the investigational product or working on certain forms, being able to put those in or highlight them is really great, because then we can do a keyword search on LinkedIn. Or a skills search. That's very helpful as well. You can highlight those in your resume so that way you're not doing double the work.
And is there, like you said, I know some companies use AI, but is there like a minimum number of keywords that you're looking, like, let's say if you were looking for, I don't know, oncology, is there like a minimum amount of times that you would like to see it throughout the resume in order for you to say, okay, I'll proceed? Or is none of that relevant? You just want to see those keywords listed at least once?
I think it really depends on the recruiter. I just look for it once. So if I'm looking at your resume, and I did a LinkedIn article on this, because on average, a recruiter only spends 6 seconds looking at a resume. 6. It's all you have to make a good impression. Mm-hmm. So it needs to be very easy to read. You need to be able to highlight your key skills. I'll say, where are you located? Because maybe my role, you have to be located in a certain area. So having just that city and state is all you need. Having your contact information. It is so silly, but I have gotten resumes without anyone's name on it, without a phone number to reach them at, without an email, and they may be an amazing candidate, but I don't have their name. And a lot of the times, if you upload your resume to our ATS system, it will automatically pull the information off of your CV. And so if your name's not on there, it may put in your name as clinical coordinator, and that's what we see on our end. So name, all of that. If you're working on oncology, you can list that under your job description. You can list it in a skills section, wherever you want, whatever is going to be easiest for you. Just highlight those areas that you've worked in. It helps us if you use numbers. So tell us how many studies you've worked on. Highlight that. Don't just say that you've worked on studies. Say, I've worked on 34 studies. That's what's really going to make you stand out and show your experience, is highlighting the numbers, the impact that you've made on that company.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned the 6-second rule. What makes you want to keep going versus say, you reach the 6-second mark and you're like, on to the next?
Yeah. So as I said before, when I pull up a CV, the first thing I'll do, I'll look at your name. I'll look at where you're located. I look at your company and your title for that role. Maybe I need people with a certain title. And then I'm just going to do a quick skim of the job description to look for those keywords. Are you actually a coordinator, or are you a research assistant with that coordinator title? So we will just do a quick skim of that. Things that will make me look away pretty quickly. If you have spelling or grammatical errors, they stand out. It is crazy. I'll see CVs submitted and it'll have the red squiggly line underneath. And it tells you, you saved that. You were able to see that there's a spelling error, but you didn't correct it before submitting it to me. So that shows a lack of attention to detail. Does that mean I'm not going to move forward with you? No. But our hiring managers put a lot of weight on attention to detail. You're going to need that, especially as a CRA when you're reviewing documents. And that's something that you need to make sure you're representing your best self. Take that extra second, have somebody look over your resume for you, just to make sure that you are representing yourself in the best light and highlighting all of your amazing experience.
Absolutely. So what would you say is the biggest hurdle or challenge that you've seen for entry level candidates? And what advice would you give people to overcome that specific hurdle or challenge?
Unfortunately, it is timing. A lot of people come to me and they may be looking for an opportunity, but we don't have openings at that time. Alternatively, we may have an opportunity, but a lot of the times these entry level groups start in cohorts. So if you have a vacation coming up during that time or within a few weeks of starting, you would either need to decide what's more important to you at this time, taking that vacation or starting a new role. If not, we can reconnect in the future for our next cohort. I think just finding that opening, because there are such a limited number of entry level openings. So it is very important for you to highlight your experience, to show us just how amazing you are. We would love if we could to give everyone a job, but because there are limited jobs, the competition is so high. So you really need to show all of your skills. You need to do it quickly. And then when it comes down to that interview, you may only have one shot. So go in, be professional, practice, practice talking about yourself, practice your interviewing questions, practice all of the behavioral questions, like you've said, know your clinical knowledge because you're going to be questioned on that. And if we don't move forward, ask for feedback. Don't be afraid to reach out to your recruiter. They're going to do their best to respond to you. I know a lot of us are incredibly busy. If you reach out to me, I will always try to respond to you. I'll try and tell you, all right, well, Jasmine, you did a great job here. However, on this one behavioral question, the team had to prompt you multiple times. They just think you need a little more time in your role. Or maybe you just need to gain some additional experience in your current role. Maybe we'd love to consider you, but there were only 2 openings and you weren't one of our top 2 candidates. That doesn't mean that we rule you out for the future.
Absolutely. Great advice. And another question, I feel kind of hesitant to ask it. But I mean, everybody needs to know, right? Is there such thing as being blacklisted? Does that truly exist? And not saying that there's like an official blacklist, but you get yourself in a situation, in a position where you kind of created this bad name or this bad reputation for yourself, and nobody really wants to go near you in terms of, connecting and bringing you in for a role.
I would say it depends on what you did. So no company has an official blacklist, but there may be companies where they may have noted your profile for a certain reason. So again, we talk about falsifying your experience. That is something you never want to do, no matter the case. We want you to show you we want you to show us who you truly are. So that's going to be a reason. I know I've talked to candidates before where they may be interviewing with multiple companies and we get to that offer stage and they decline. That doesn't mean you're blacklisted. I mean, I want you to go out and see all those opportunities available and find the best opportunity for you. As long as you decline our offer in a respectful way, we will 100% consider you in the future. Obviously, you are a great candidate. We got you to that offer stage.
Right.
But other situations, though, I've had candidates accept an offer, they're getting ready to start, and then the day before they start date, they tell me they've now accepted another offer. That does not put you in the best light. It doesn't mean that we're never going to consider you in the future. However, if you do that to companies, it really puts the business in a hard spot, and it really shows us, what your character is like. So as long as you decline an offer in a respectful manner, companies will consider you in the future. If you happen to go in, you bomb your interview, that is okay. Gain that experience, we'll reconsider you. Some companies will reconsider you in a few months. Some companies make you wait a year to re-interview. That's okay. If it comes down to an interview and you stand us up, I understand things come up all the time. There may be a medical emergency. Work may have gotten busy, but you need to try to give as much notice as you can to your interviewer why you're not going to make it. If you're just a no-show and you ghost on us, then that's a hard situation as well. So really think about, how are you portraying yourself and what kind of light are you putting yourself on? Because as you've mentioned before, you really only have one chance to make that impact. And there are a lot of candidates out there who really want these positions. So we're going to look at the whole picture and pick the best qualified candidate for the role.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot today, from beginning to end, pretty much, of how, the types of experience you should be seeking to gain, all the way to once you actually get that interview, how to prepare and how to be successful in landing that offer. So what are your final words that you want to leave to that aspiring CRA that is dying to be a CRA? You know, they have the experience, they've done the things that we've talked about. Maybe they were a CTA and a CRC. They have the degree. Maybe they have a bachelor's and an advanced level degree. Maybe they even have a certification, because I get those people too. And it's like, you see their resume, you see their profile, and they look amazing, but they still just haven't been able to get, you know, that interview or that offer. So what would be your last words that you want to leave to aspiring CRAs, but especially those people that seem to be right on the cusp, but they just can't knock down that door?
I would say don't give up. Really keep trying, and it is very important to stay positive. As you've mentioned in your other videos, you can't take things personally. It's never against you. It may just not be the right time, or we may not have enough openings. Keep trying. Use your network. Set those job alerts on the various company websites so you can be notified and apply right away. And don't be afraid to connect with the recruiters. So you can search on LinkedIn the company name and type in the word recruiter or talent acquisition. It'll pull up all of those recruiters for that company. Find the people who are working on those CRA roles. Connect with them. They're going to post on their pages when they have new roles opening, and then go ahead and apply. Make sure you're waiting to apply for the right position, whether it is entry level or whether it is a CRA1 position, and you'll get in that way. But it is just very important. Don't give up no matter what. Keep trying and stay positive.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for taking the time and sharing today with us. You have given so many nuggets and diamonds and and wonderful information that I'm sure we can all. I even got something from it as an experienced CRA. So thank you so much for taking the time with me today to share.
Thank you, Jasmine. It was a pleasure.